live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into today's episode, you guys know how it works. We got to get into some housekeeping things. We are around, right now, 120 subscribers. Make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on your post notifications because we are bringing you all the Detroit Pistons content, and you need to be in the news and in the updates of everything that's going on with the organization, and we can help you with that. Also, follow us on Instagram because we are constantly posting updates and clips of everything that happens each and every episode, so make sure to follow us on Instagram. Also, we might be Summer League is quickly approaching. When this comes out, Summer League will be in its midst and in the middle of it all. So be on the lookout for all kinds of Summer League content because a lot is going to be going down with the Detroit Pistons. Asar Thompson, Marcus Sasser, that's going to be our first look at these young rookies and kind of see what they can do in this fast NBA pace that is NBA Summer League. Okay, let's get into it. Episode number 35. A lot of trades have happened with the Detroit Pistons this last week. We have newly acquired Nets small forward, now Detroit Pistons small forward, Joe Harris, and then Michigan native Monte Morris. I'm so excited to get into the details about that point guard coming from the Washington Wizards. But let's start off with what we can. Today's topic is going to be kind of the impact we can expect from these two guys. Let's start off with Joe Harris. Last year, his statistics were 7.6 assists, 2.2 rebounds, 45% shooting from the field, and 42% from the three-point line. What are some of your first thoughts, Ryan, on the sharpshooter Joe Harris?
Obviously, starting out in Cleveland when he got drafted, he bounced around from being called up to being called down with the G League and everything. But then once Brooklyn acquired him, we know Joe Harris as a three-point shooter, and that's because of Brooklyn. They gave him that opportunity, and he thrived. He is by far one of the best shooters in this league. Mm-hmm. He's not anywhere near Steph Curry, obviously. Nobody can be close to him.
Right.
In my opinion, he's not close to Larry Bird either, but he's still one of the better shooters in today's game. And so when we desperately need three-point shooting, Troy Weaver made that move to get three-point shooting. And this dude is much better than Bojan is. Let's just be realistic here. Because Joe Harris can do more than Bojan can. Bojan can pretty much just shoot. That's it. He doesn't like passing the ball. We already know that. Mm-hmm. So what can Joe Harris do that's different? Well, Joe Harris is a facilitator. He can play guard. He's 6'6", 220. So he's a small forward. But he can still shoot. Like, the fact that he shot 46% from the field this past season, but then also over 40% from three, that's undeniable. That he's a shooter, and Troy Weaver covered that base right away with this trade. And the bright side for me is we didn't give up any players to get him. We just gave up 2 future second-round picks, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Wait, no, we didn't. We didn't even give up. No, I messed up.
We received 2.
Yeah, we received 2. We received 2, and then Joe Harris, and all we gave away was cash.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, we got him for cash.
And the thing with Joe Harris, though, is I'm not judging the 7.6 points a game, but the Pistons are going to be giving him $20 million. That is so much money. He's an unrestricted free agent next season, so now we for sure only have him for 1 season. Now, that's a lot of dough.
It is.
Are you giving him the same expectations we gave Bojan when he came into Detroit? Is it a similar situation, or is he going to kind of take a step back and not have as many minutes? What are some of your thoughts on the impact we can expect compared to Bojan and Joe Harris?
I think the difference between the two is the expectations for Bojan was coming in and scoring. That was his expectation, was just score.
Yeah.
The difference for me is I think Joe Harris is just going to be told, shoot when you have a shot open. That's about it. That's all you've been brought here to do. But he's a kind of player that can do more than what he can do. So I just expect him to be a shooter, and that's it. especially when you have Cade running the offense and then Jaden backing him up and just the whole gang going. I just see Joe as a shooter, and that's what we need him to be. Kind of like what Tayshaun was. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Tayshaun didn't do anything. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is Tayshaun filled that role of just being a shooter pretty much in that offense with the going to work Pistons, with Chauncey running point and Rip right there with him. Like, that's what he was known for, was shooting the ball. And that's what I'm not saying Joe Harris is going to come in and start and that's what his job's going to be. He's going to be the new Tayshaun. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is he has similar traits to Tayshaun that we will see come out this season.
Comment below what you expect from Joe Harris compared to like what you expected with Bojan. I'd love to know the subscribers' thoughts on this. But for me, when I saw this trade go down, it seemed to me that the Pistons are in this, getting towards this win now perspective, because we know the Pistons have their superstar player in Cade Cunningham. We have the great number 2 player that can give you offense and defense in Jaden Ivey. We got the 2 solid defenders in the paint with Jalen Duren and James Wiseman. These are all players you need to have a winning recipe. And then you add in the sharpshooter that every championship caliber team needs. And is that kind of where your head's at too? Or am I getting a little too ahead of myself? No. It just seems that like Troy Weaver's making these moves to make the Pistons a win-now team.
No, yeah. Every single move he's made this offseason, it's been a good move. Obviously, Joe Harris is a phenomenal move, but in the fact that you just give Brooklyn cash for him, that's a win in my book. And we also got 2 second-round picks with him, so I'm not arguing that value. But then you look at like Monte Morris there, we only gave up a second-round pick for him, and that was it. Like, Weaver is pulling the strings really right now. He's trading away little to none assets or players to get high-end value players at their position. And that's what you need to see to take that next step to being a championship caliber team. Now, I saw today on the Pistons post of officially official with Joe Harris, what up, Doe, what up, Joe. But
I love that.
But I saw a comment as I was scrolling through saying, like, we're wasting all our money and our cap space on Joe Harris's contract alone. And I'm sitting there going, dude, it's an expiring contract for one. And then also, this is making our team better. It's not making it worse. And out of the cap space that we would have had available, if we were to sign anybody currently, all of the best players are off the market.
Right.
There's nobody to sign.
Exactly.
So realistically, who cares if we take on Joe Harris's $19 million that takes up majority of our cap space right now, because he's just going to help and benefit our team going forward. It's not like there's a high-end player that we're missing right now. The realistic approach is there's nobody out there that Troy Weaver sees value in to help our team, and he sees more valuable in Joe Harris and just giving cash away for a player. Like, the amount of value we got back versus overpaying a low-end player, like, I'd rather take Joe Harris.
It was basically a free agent signing, just giving cash and then getting a player. Guys like Cam Johnson, Kyle Kuzma, Gary Trent Jr., all these guys we talked about being a possible signee for the Pistons, they're all re-signed with their teams or they're shipped off somewhere else. So I think it was a move where I think everything kind of happened quicker than Troy Weaver may have expected. Maybe he was trying to be aggressive with some of those guys, and then they just all re-signed with their current teams, and then he's like, all right, I see Joe Harris over there with Brooklyn. Let's see what I can get for him. And he made it happen. Last week, we talked about Asar Thompson and the new rookies that are coming in for the Detroit Pistons. We talked about with Asar how his three-point shooting isn't quite there. We saw Isaiah Livers in his first 3 seasons, his three-point shooting not really there. Bringing in a guy like Joe Harris, what does that mean for these young rookies to get around a guy like that of a three-point shot of that high of caliber and kind of get him in there with those young guys and try to maybe develop those guys, is just having a guy like Joe Harris around?
Yeah, I think it adds value to these young guys in the sense that Joe Harris has experience. He's been in the league for a while now. He's been historically one of the best shooters in NBA history every single season pretty much. And then you look at, he is a 3-point contest champion. Like, that's hard to do, actually. When you go, like Curry was talking about it, when you train for the 3-point contest, that's much different than just going in the gym and shooting. Like, the fact that you have to grab a ball and get it up in the right position with very few seconds and get that shot off and make it every single time, like, that's very hard to do. So the fact that Joe Harris even has that experience too, that adds a whole nother level to this, in the sense that he's trained his shot. He knows what to do, what not to do. It's in his DNA that he's a 3-point shooter. And so when you have guys like him, when you have Monte Morris can even shoot, when you have Bojan who can even shoot, like, you add all these good shot creators around young guys, these young guys are able to witness and watch and just sit back and chill and see what these guys are doing and how to do it that way. And then, then you have Joe Harris coming up and going like, hey, I noticed you were shooting that way. Let's adjust your hands a little bit. Let's tweak it. And so I just see all of these moves that Weaver's made with Joe Harris and Monte Morris right now. It's adding value and experience and knowledge to these young guys coming up.
So picture this. Marcus Sasser, Killian Hayes at the 1, Alec Burks at the 2, Joe Harris at the 3, Marvin Bagley, there's a list of names, Isaiah Stewart, a list of names that could go at the 4 and 5. Yep. How do you see that mixing in that second unit with Joe Harris?
I think Joe Harris elevates the second unit.
Yeah.
And that's not a dig towards any of those other guys, because obviously those other guys are good too. But when you look at our team's biggest weakness, it's the wing.
Yeah.
It is. Like, the last couple seasons, our biggest weakness is not having a good wing. And that's not a shot at anybody, but when you have Isaiah Livers who disappears from time to time, or you have guys that, like Bojan, who does his job and then gives up at the end.
Right.
Like, we're not having consistently good wing play. We haven't had that for some time. We haven't had that really since Tayshaun, let's be realistic here. And so when we're adding in a guy like Joe Harris, who can do a lot more than just shoot the ball, that elevates the whole offense and defense, honestly. I know he's not the greatest defender, but he at least tries, and that's what you can hang your hat on.
Yeah, you could even mix Monte Morris at the 1 there with Killian and Marcus and all those guys.
Yep.
And that's why I like these 2 free agents, because a lot of times when free agents get brought in, you don't know how they're going to mix. When watching Monte Morris and Joe Harris, they're transition guys. Joe Harris is a very good 3-point shooter in transition offense. Monte Morris is known for wanting to push that ball down the floor offensively. I think those 2 guys, if you see them in the second unit together, are going to play very well, and I think they're going to complement each other very well. Let's move on to Monte Morris, Michigan native. Played his last year with the Washington Wizards. His stat line was 10 points a game, 3.4 rebounds. This is where I was impressed for coming off the bench. 5.3 assists per game. I love seeing that. Yep. And 48% from the field. Pretty efficient for the point guard position. We see a lot of backup point guards, or those starting point guards, hovering around that 39% from the field. Monte able to get around that 48%. I love that. What are some of your first thoughts on Monte?
Well, Monte, for me, obviously, Washington, he didn't excel. He was one of the better players on that team, but his numbers just weren't there compared to what Washington expected them to be. That's why they kind of gave up on him a little bit there. But my favorite Monte Morris was when he was in Denver.
Right.
When you have him going up with the second unit and then not even just the second unit, but when he's in the game with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. and you see him flying around and you're like, holy crap, who is that guy?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm the most excited about, honestly. Seeing him flying around with Cade, seeing him flying around with Jaden, seeing him flying around with anybody on our team, because he's that guy. He's very explosive. He can cut. He has a good floater, has a good jump shot. Like, he can do everything that you want a second-tier point guard to do in the NBA. That's him. And so when you add him into even the development of a Killian Hayes or a Marcus Sasser or Jaden Ivey or a continuation of a development with Cade, not saying that Monte needs to help Cade out. I'm not saying that necessarily, but
Right.
like Cade doesn't need help, but just getting veteran experience from a guy like Monte Morris,
yeah.
that's very valuable. Like
Absolutely.
you can learn stuff from just about anybody. They can have less experience than you have, but you still learn something at the end of the day. So I see this move as just something of helping out the young guys, but then also making this a playoff caliber team.
Absolutely. I wanted to look at like his stats last season because, like you said, him with the Nuggets was unmatched when that last season with the Nuggets was able to go to Washington on a nice big contract, kind of get that money. And last year, I wanted to look at what his best game of the season was, and we actually saw that against the Denver Nuggets in December for the Washington Wizards. He had 20 points, 7 assists, 4 of 7 from the three-point line, and 7 of 11 from the field. So yes, what sticks out is the scoring, the assists, but like with this guy, we need that consistent shooting off the bench. Last year, Hamidou Diallo, Corey Joseph, we didn't know what they were going to give us on each and every night. Yeah. Monte Morris is going to give you that efficient scoring where he's not going to be forcing the shots up, forcing the notion that he's going to get all the shots up he can. He had a 20-point game, but only shot 11 shots.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you love to see from the point guard position because guys like Kyrie Irving, Russell Westbrook in years past have pushed the notion of get as many shots up as you can, where Monte Morris is kind of one of those old school point guards that just lets the game come to him. And our second unit has needed that efficiency so badly because having a young core like the Pistons do at the starting positions, they're not going to always be the most efficient players. And that's why we need guys like Monte Morris, Joe Harris, Alec Burks coming off the bench and giving that boost to the offense without being reckless and with reckless abandonment. And I think our second unit is going to be one of the best in the league this year. I really do.
No, yeah, I agree with that. And honestly, these moves have to do something with Monte. Like, if you look at Monte with Phoenix, you saw how fast-paced they were. You saw how explosive they were. And so when you add two explosive guys in Joe Harris and Monte Morris, it's setting the tone for what this season we should expect in the sense that we're going to see these guys flying all over the place. I don't think this is going to be a slow-paced offense. I think this is going to be a fast-paced offense. And then you even look at our third unit in the sense of you could potentially have Monte Morris at the 1, Alec Burks at the 2, Joe Harris at the 3, and then who name it at the 4 and 5. Like, you could put anyone there. But, like, even with that third group, that's better than half the second units in the NBA alone. Yeah. So, like, all these moves, people may just discredit them a little bit because we're not making any free agent signings or anything. Instead, we're making trades, and it's been very quiet this offseason compared to normal, what it has been. But I see these moves as a stepping block. Like, you're stepping up to a new tier in the NBA in the sense of, we don't want to be in a rebuild anymore. We're trying to restore, as everybody has been saying. We're going to continue to say. We're in the restore phase. We're not in the rebuild phase. We have the pieces there. We just need to restore it by adding some other guys into the mix and adding veteran experience from a Monte Morris for a good high-end point guard in the NBA and a Joe Harris who is one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. It's just you're adding value into a rebuild that is now in the restore phase that now can take that next jump.
I'm sure you're expecting this question. I have to ask because there's been mumblings around the Detroit Pistons fan base about Killian Hayes' future, now bringing in a guy like Monte Morris. We saw Corey Joseph get cut. The Pistons brought in Marcus Sasser, the 6'2" point guard, and there was rumblings of, okay, what does this mean for Killian? Nothing really happens after Marcus Sasser gets drafted. We assumed that Killian was okay, even with the drafting of Marcus. Now bringing in another 6'2" point guard in Monte Morris, who's a little bit more vetted, been in the league 6 years. having Marcus on the roster, we can maybe say that he's going to be going to the G League, so that kind of takes away another point guard. But at 25, you don't really want your 25th pick just chilling in the G League all season. With bringing in Monte, what are your thoughts with Killian? Is it the same, not to worry about it, or is Killian maybe on the cutting block?
No worries, no doubts or anything. He's fine. The reason I say that is because you look at who we just signed to a two-way deal recently that hasn't been talked about. I'm blanking on his name, but he played with Killian in France. We signed one of his former teammates, and you don't just sign a former teammate of a random player on your team.
Right.
Unless it's absolutely necessary, or you see it as like, maybe this is something to help unlock him. And so I see it as like they brought him in, right? I'm blanking on his name. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
I'm trying to find it. It keeps blurring out.
But you don't just commit to a guy that nobody knows about without there being a connection somehow.
Right.
And they believe in Killian clearly still, because you don't just sign a random player that has a connection to him. So I think Killian Hayes is just fine. I don't think we need to worry about him at all. I know a lot of you out there do not want him and do not like him, but I do, so you're wrong. I'm kidding. But no, I think Killian still has an extremely high ceiling.
Yeah.
Obviously, the value we're getting for taking him at 7 is not, it doesn't match.
Right.
We're not getting a value, the same value we should be getting at a 7th overall pick, realistically. But he fits what we need, and we need defense. We need a guy who can facilitate. And that's why you bring in a guy like Monte Morris. These guys are on expiring deals. You add in experience and expiring deals that you can flip for other assets down the road,
right.
Or you just help them grow and develop these young guys like Killian Hayes and Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and Marcus Sasser. These are assets that you can help grow with. So I think Killian is just fine. I don't think he's going to get moved anytime soon. And if he does, it's because we're getting a better player in return, because that's the caliber of a player that Killian is. He is a high-end point guard. He's not there yet, but he has such a high ceiling, and he's just going to get there someday.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hit on. With a guy like Monte, he's kind of at his peak, per se, right now. Killian, we don't know what his upside is. His ceiling is so high, we just don't know if he's going to get there. I mean, being a 6'5" point guard, he can thrive in the NBA. We just need him to just keep developing. He's gotten better each year. We just need him to make a little bit bigger of a jump this season. That's why I also think he's safe, because a guy like Monte, we could see him getting moved in this upcoming season, maybe at the midway mark. I don't see that with Killian as much. I see he's a little bit more, he's more of a gamble, but the payoff is that much higher than a guy like Monte. So make sure to comment below what you guys think, if Killian Hayes is on the chopping block, or if you see him being long-term, and kind of give us your thoughts on bringing in a Michigan native guy like Monte Morris. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
I will say, too, though, if realistically, let's think this through here.
Okay.
Who do you value more, Isaiah Livers or Killian Hayes? Because Isaiah Livers has played much worse than Killian has, and yet we're still holding on to him. So clearly the Pistons value Livers still enough to keep him.
Right.
So therefore, yeah, Killian's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I do like that sentiment. I like that idea of, okay, Isaiah Livers and Killian last season were probably the guys that were the most up and down, so drastic. They both have 20-point games, and then they'd have 10 games where they were just goose eggs. So I could easily see Isaiah Livers getting shipped way quicker than a guy like Killian, especially bringing in guys like Joe Harris. I think Isaiah Livers should be probably shaking in his boots a little bit right now. It says on the Summer League roster Isaiah Livers is going to be playing. He is on the roster. He's got to have a good Summer League. And if he gets hurt in this first Orlando game or something, I mean, he'll be lucky, because he can't get shipped when you're on injury. So.
And Killian hasn't been in Summer League recently, so
yeah, we'll see.
That just shows you they value him more.
Yeah, time will tell. we're Michigan natives.
Yep.
All we know is Michigan. And bringing in a guy like Monte that grew up in Michigan, from Michigan, what does it mean to have a fellow Michigander on the Detroit Pistons? Because for me, it's pretty special to have a hometown guy in a Pistons jersey.
Yeah, it's always the best feeling. You always dream of one day playing for your hometown team, essentially.
Right.
Every kid has that dream, no matter if you suck or if you don't. And Monte obviously grew up watching Pistons basketball. He watched it with the Going to Work Pistons just like we did.
Yep.
And so, of course he wants to be a Piston. He's so excited. As soon as the trade was finalized, he tweeted out, boom, I'm coming to Detroit. He's excited. We're excited. And that's just it goes back to us even talking about Kyle Kuzma coming to the Pistons. And other Pistons fans talking about Kyle Kuzma coming to the Pistons. He's a Michigan native. We want our Michigan guys back. We want Devin Booker on the Pistons at some point. Dude. We want all these guys.
We have Isaiah Livers.
We do.
Which is cool.
But he's not great.
No, he's not great. But it's nice.
If you're watching this, I'm sorry. But let's be realistic here.
It's nice just to have Michigan. I wonder how many NBA teams have two hometown guys on their
I can't
team.
think of any, honestly.
I know, I can't either.
But there's a lot. But back to the point, I think the fact that we've had or have been able to experience high-end caliber Michigan players playing for the Pistons is just special. And honestly, we have so many high-end Michigan natives playing on other NBA teams.
Yeah.
It just shows you how much better we are than any other state.
We're the best. Go Big Blue, by the way. We always got to put that in an episode. What I also like about Joe Harris and Monte is they're coming from teams that had superstars on their team. So they're coming from these, Washington, we said a couple weeks ago that we'll never see the Washington Wizards win a championship in our lifetime. But with that being said, he was very close with Bradley Beal, coming alongside him and kind of learning from him. And then Joe Harris coming from Brooklyn, who had guys like Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Kevin Durant. We're not a huge fan of this guy, but Kyrie Irving, James Harden he played with. So, these guys are coming from teams that played with big names that are dedicated to their craft. And I love that because we need to start developing that winning mentality, that just going to work days. And we really need to kind of dig deep into that. And guys like Monte and Joe, I think, are really going to kind of bring that professional feel to the Pistons because, they're a bunch of 20-some age guys that are still finding their way in the NBA. Monte and Joe have played with big names and know the NBA and know that professional side of the game, and I think they're going to add that to the Pistons. Another thing that's cool about Morris coming from Michigan is I love the fact that Morris and Livers have family in Michigan. So guys like Cade, Jaden, Jalen, Stu are all getting that much closer to the community because they're all best buds. They're going to be friends and they're going to be welcoming them to their families. And I think that's cool that they're just getting that much ingrained in Michigan because in a couple of years when Cade Cunningham's contract comes up, we're going to have to be giving him the Michigan sales pitch again. And I think guys like Morris and Livers are going to help with that recruitment style of keeping him in Michigan.
Yeah, and going back to the experience with superstars, Monte obviously only played with Bradley Beal in Washington. There was nobody superstar. You could kind of say Kristaps Porzingis, but let's be realistic here. He's not a superstar. He's at least all-star.
I like Beal.
But still, Beal back in the day played with Russell Westbrook. Beal said in a recent interview, the most knowledge he's been able to learn from any former player has been from Russell Westbrook. So I'm not saying Russell Westbrook is a former player, but he's a former player to the Washington Wizards.
Right.
But still, Russell Westbrook knows what it takes to win. Granted, he hasn't had a championship yet, but he knows what it takes to win.
Yeah.
Bradley Beal learned that from him, and he also knows what it takes to win. Now, he hasn't won, and Washington will never win, but still. And then you look at Joe Harris's side of things with Brooklyn even. Or even going back to Monte Morris, he played in Denver.
Yep.
He played with Jamal Murray. He played with Nikola Jokic. He knows what it takes to win. Obviously, they weren't there yet. But then you look at Joe Harris' side of things with Brooklyn. He's played with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's won a championship with the Golden State Warriors. Mm-hmm. With the Thunder, he was in the Western Conference Finals. Like, he knows, he's obviously one of the best players to ever play the game by far. No doubt about that. So the fact that he's learned from Kevin Durant, he knows what it takes to win. Kyrie Irving won a championship with Cleveland. So therefore, he gained also that knowledge. He gained knowledge from James Harden. Like, he's learned so much from different players. Both of these guys have.
Yeah.
That all this valuable knowledge that they've possessed throughout the years, they can now shove on to these young guys to really show them, like, hey, you're not working hard enough. This is what it takes. And so that's why I'm the most excited about these two moves alone compared to a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic when we got him, because Bojan really only played on mediocre teams leading up to Detroit.
Yeah.
He didn't play anywhere special. Yeah, he got to play with Donovan Mitchell, who's one of the best guards in the NBA. But outside of Donovan Mitchell, he really hasn't played with anybody spectacular. But that's the difference between Monte Morris and Joe Harris, is they have that knowledge.
Yeah, I love it. We are going to continue to trust in Troy. We just talked about Monte Morris and Joe Harris, the most new and recent Detroit Pistons players added to our roster. And we have so much to look forward to this next season. I am going to be so fired up for the first tip-off of the season. It's going to be so exciting. That will do it for episode number 35. Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on your post notifications. Also, you might have noticed a new background. Well, the owner of Grind Clothing Co. created that for us. So shout out him because he's a real beast. That is Ryan, to be exact. So go show Grind Clothing Co. some love, because if you have a business or a podcast or need a social media logo or anything like that, come to this guy and come to Grind Clothing Co. because they can create awesome stuff like that. And so make sure to follow them on Instagram. The links to our merch and Grind Clothing Co.'s merch is in our YouTube bio and below this video. So make sure to go show them some love. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.